Hi everybody, welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Mucha Marapa from Matrix Global Media, and we call on the very best online marketers, industry experts and authoritative minds and ask them to share with us what they're doing, what they know and what they've learned. Now, while today's topic covers the often misunderstood area known as Twitter, I feel describing my guest today merely as a Twitter expert would in many ways not do this very talented entrepreneur justice. Roeder is fast establishing herself as one of the leading social media marketers and has demonstrated confidence and competence throughout the entire social media cluster. And I'm delighted to welcome Laura to the show. Thank you, Laura, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
No, it's great. Well, Laura, before we sort of get into the whole social media and Twitter thing, and to be fair, I'm sitting here with my notebook ready to take copious notes just like everybody else. You've got a really fascinating story. So would you mind taking a little time out and tell us the Laura Roeder story thus far?
Yeah, the short version.
Okay.
So I started my business when I was very young. I started my first business when I was 22 years old. I had been doing design for an ad agency in Chicago, and I was getting bored and I wanted to go out on my own, and I figured, well, I know how to make websites and small businesses need websites, so if I can just get one client, if I can find one business in all of Chicago that needs a website, then I'll be in business. So that's exactly what I did. So I had, a pretty standard freelance web design business, making websites and business cards and stuff for small businesses, and my business was doing really well by all measures. I was making, I think, $60,000 a year, and I had made half that since I was just at an entry-level position before. So I was making good money, my business was doing well, but I saw that there was this ceiling on the amount of money I can make and how big I could grow my business, because I was clear that I didn't want to build a traditional agency, but I could only do so many web design projects at a time myself. I could only charge so much money for them. My rates were already pretty good. And I was getting a little tired of being in that client services model. If you're in that model, you know that there's a lot of urgency, there's a lot of firefighting, and it just doesn't really go well with my temperament. I'm more of a laid-back type, I guess.
Sure.
So after doing that for about 2 years, people kept telling me that social media was getting to be this really hot thing for the small business. Because I actually have a background in marketing and advertising. My degree from university is in advertising. And for my web design clients, I would always advise them on how to use these tools, social media, when they came around, how to get traffic to their website, why are people coming to your website, what are they going to do there. I viewed that as the sort of throwaway. I thought the service I was providing was making the website, and that was just sort of some extra fun stuff that we talked about on top. And, in 2008, 2009, Twitter started really hitting the mainstream. Small businesses started getting really interested. Facebook businesses were just starting to be interested in as well. I don't think there were even pages on Facebook in that time. But people kept telling me, you could get paid just to tell people how to use social media. And I thought, that is ridiculous. Who is going to pay, just to learn how to use social media? Can't people figure that out? This is what I thought at the time. Obviously, I've learned better now. I thought it was so funny that I could get paid for something that to me was such a no-brainer. And I think that's actually a common roadblock for businesses. Whatever you are really good at, you so take for granted. And it seems obvious to you. It seems like everyone can figure it out. But that's because you're so good at it that it just comes really naturally. So I decided to give it a shot. I actually fired all my web design clients. I guess I'm kind of all or nothing. I knew that if I was still doing web design, I would just it was sort of easy money for me, so I'd keep getting stuck in that. And basically I figured out what I have now, which is really a scalable consulting business, where instead of doing normal consulting, I actually create video consulting programs. So instead of the typical sitting down in person with a consultant, small businesses watch my videos and learn how to do it for themselves, which I think is really exciting. I think as a small business owner, you really need to be empowered to learn these things on your own, be able to do these things on your own instead of relying on outside help and not really understanding exactly what's going on.
I also feel that there's nothing worse than having that helpless feeling when you need some pretty basic stuff done, but either they're out of town, they're sick,
right.
They're just taking time off, they've got 15 other clients, and you just have to wait. It's just an awful position to be in.
Absolutely. And actually a lot of people will buy my training programs just to learn how to hire someone, because if you've never gotten on Twitter before, it's really hard to have any measure for who's doing a good job, who's legitimate, who knows what they're talking about. So yeah, it can actually also be really useful just for understanding the topics so that you don't feel helpless, so that you can, even if you're hiring someone, you know how to hire and you can jump in, like you said, on that day they're not available.
So then, when we sort of start talking about you being in Chicago, because you live in a very, very enviable part of the world now, and so how did the move come from moving from Illinois over to California?
So I love Chicago, but it's a little cold. I grew up in Texas. I did not have winter. And if anyone listening, I know you probably have listeners all over the world. Maybe you're not familiar with the weather in Chicago. It snows for basically a solid 6 months. It's not the most pleasant weather. And I actually had a good friend of mine is an actress, and she had moved out to LA to pursue her acting career, which is now doing very well. And I would come visit her, and I just thought, wow, this place is great. The beach, it's beautiful, the weather's perfect all the time. And I really wanted to move to Los Angeles, to the beach specifically. And what I found that was really interesting is the more I started thinking about this, the more I kind of realized, why not, right? My business is portable. It's an online business. I can move wherever I want. And as I really started bringing it into reality, I found that wanting to live somewhere else is not a socially acceptable reason for moving to most people. I would tell people I was moving to California, and they would say, oh, did you get a job? Do you have a boyfriend out there? Did your family move out there? And I was like, no, I just want to live there. And people found that very odd, which was very funny to me. And I actually got a lot of resistance, like, that's silly. And the whole experience really made me realize that we often have these dreams that we think are sort of difficult or far off in some way, but moving somewhere is not hard. I mean, you have to plan a few logistics, you have to figure out how to get your stuff there, or you can just leave your stuff behind. But it's really not the most difficult task in the world. But we often view these things as, oh, someday, wouldn't it be so great if I could live in California? Well, just pick up and move to California. That's what I did.
And, I suppose something I can relate to here, my brother, he was actually out in Palo Alto. He was at Stanford, and then his first job was on Wall Street, so he was in New York, and then an opportunity to move back to California and specifically live and work in Santa Monica came up. And it was almost one of these things where when he and his wife, Heather, sort of just literally stepped off the plane, it was sort of, hey, provided these guys aren't offering a job where we have to do something unbelievably menial here and stuff, we're here. Because I think there's an awful lot about how productive you can be when you're in an environment and a part of the world that sort of just resonates with you.
Oh yeah, I think living somewhere that you love, for me, it's really important because it just makes my everyday life so much better.
Fantastic. So you arrive in California, and you're doing some consulting, and you're showing some people an awful lot of how-tos. And when did the whole social media side of things sort of really begin to not necessarily hit you, but when did you begin to feel that, hey, listen, there's an opportunity here for me to begin to sort of serve others with my knowledge and just help them along their way?
So when I saw the light is when I did my first online training program in early 2009, which actually was my Twitter program, Your Backstage Pass to Twitter, which is still available. Obviously, it's been updated since 2009, but concepts are still the same. And I had been doing some consulting, but the problem was being a typical consultant still put me in the same constraints as being a web designer. It was still a client model. It still couldn't scale very well, right? I was going to get to a point where I was going to be fully booked and I was going to be charging good money, and that would sort of be the ceiling of my business. So the first time I ever did an online training program, the first one I did, I made about $3,000 from selling that one. And I thought, man, I used to spend months trying to get a single contract signed for $3,000. And for me, the online program model felt much easier, much more fun. I mean, this is just going to be different for everybody, right? For some people, they love to do consulting. The online programs are going to be a nightmare. But because I am more technical, all the back end of setting it up and all that stuff came very easily to me. I really had fun putting the program together. So after I saw that I could make money off of it, and I always tell my clients, look to where the money is coming to you easily. Because I often see a tendency in myself and others that we try to make this difficult. We'll have something that's earning us great money that's sort of a no-brainer, it feels easy to do, and then we try to start this whole other project, or we try to change it in some way. It's like, no, people are paying you for that, you enjoy it, focus on that, where the money is coming to you easily. So I really saw for me, this feels like a way that money can come to me easily, and I really enjoy it. So after I had that experience, I mean, I just went for that 100%, and my business has been growing really quickly ever since.
Fantastic. So now we move on specifically to Twitter, and I think what I tried to stress with my 6 of the best on the social media was it's almost like having an A4 sheet of paper, Laura, where you draw a line down the middle of the page and you say on one side there is social media for Joe Public, and then there's social media for the small business, the consultant, the entrepreneur. So what led you to sort of really sort of peel the onion back when it came to Twitter, and how did that sort of all translate your own thought process as far as how, because you see celebrities, this is my point, someone wins an Oscar, thanks to all my fans for that, and, la-di-da-di-da, or someone, a baseball player has a bad call and he says, oh, I can't believe that the referee missed that call, it's going to cost us a pennant and stuff. And then, of course, you get a business beginning to talk in that same language. What was your thought process on sort of Twitter for businesses versus Twitter for Joe Public?
So, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up celebrities, because that was sort of part of my journey of figuring out how all these things worked for business. So the friend that I mentioned that lived in LA to become an actress, she's a close friend. I had made a website for her to put up pictures of her as an actress when she was trying, when she was first starting out, trying to book gigs. And I guess it was in 2008, she booked the TV show Heroes, which I know is a huge show in the UK, is a huge show in the States, and she was on season 3, I think. She was one of the main characters on every episode of Heroes. And so when she told me she had booked that, I thought, whoa, your website is going to be getting a whole different kind of people. This was the first big thing she had booked, so I knew that her website now was not for casting agents, but was for fans, people that were going to see her on the show. And same with her Twitter account. I convinced her to get on Twitter. This was before, Demi and Ashton were on Twitter, before it was a big thing for celebrities to be on Twitter. But right. I just saw such an obvious opportunity, which Hollywood is now just barely catching on to, and the studios still don't get it, which is if you see someone that you like on a show like Heroes, and unless they're on social media, unless they're updating a blog, you have no way of being their fan. You have no way of keeping up with them and seeing them again. It's so bizarre to me. Most actors still do not even have their own website. And if you're watching someone on TV and you like them and you think, oh, she's so cool, I want to know what other shows she's on, the only hope you have of doing that is, I don't know, maybe reading celebrity magazines or watching celebrity TV shows on TV and hoping that they'll come up, or Googling their name every single day, hoping for news. It's not very easy. Where if the celebrities on Twitter, of course, you can just follow them on Twitter. If they're running a blog, you can subscribe to their blog and keep up. So with Bria, I said, you have to get on Twitter. We have to get people following you on Twitter. You're going to blog. I put together this whole social media campaign for her. She did all the updating herself, but I helped her with the strategy and bring it all together. And, her career has totally taken off, so probably thanks to me. probably thanks to social media. But through that experience with her, I really saw, you know what, this is really the exact same for a business. I really started thinking about businesses in that same celebrity framework, and the way that you see a celebrity on TV and you want to keep up with them is the same way that you go to a coffee shop that you really like and you think, wow, this place was really good, or maybe you just see it from the outside. You think, that looks really cool, I want to stop by there someday. But then from there, it's totally up to you to keep up with them, right? I know I've had the experience of even using a service provider that I really liked, but I couldn't remember their name later. Maybe I went and got my hair cut somewhere, but then, you know, a year later, I couldn't even remember the name of the salon that I had gone to, the person that I had booked. Even if you love the service, it's hard to remember it all, right? The business needs to have a way to make it easy for the customer. And so I have a program called Creating Fame, and that's really my framework for everything on how I teach social media, becoming that go-to person, becoming quote-unquote famous in your field, so that you're making it really easy for customers to love you, to like you, to keep in touch with you.
Interesting. And with Twitter in particular, was it something that you had to sort of learn yourself, or was it a lot of research you did, or was it a bit of both?
You know, I'll be honest with you. For me, these things just come so naturally.
Sickening. That is totally sickening, because it's for some of us, we just yank our hair out. So define coming naturally. It's just something you sort of you look at and you get it straight away, do you?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, you know, something like Twitter just sort of intuitively makes sense to me. I mean, obviously I keep up on the news and interesting ways different businesses are using it, but I didn't really have to learn Twitter. I just sort of jumped in. Interesting. And, you know, as far as things go and that, then do you see that it can play indeed a very significant role for the small business? And when I talk about the small business, obviously I might be talking about a sort of, you know, a hairdressing salon here on the corner, you know, in London, or a sort of, you know, your local sort of gas station in Manchester, which again, you know, when I say gas station, they've got a little bit more to that. They do this sort of maintenance for the car and the services for the car. But you know, or would you say Twitter is limited to sort of being, you know, that quote-unquote public profile? No, I think it can be very useful for both. I mean, it's sort of two different strategies, but for a business, you know, like the car maintenance or like the hair salon, I think there's sort of two ways to go about it. One is to become known as the owner of that business, which I've actually seen be much more effective, because there's some businesses that updates just aren't that interesting from. I mean, a car maintenance business, you know, you might want to know when they're having some sort of special, right, some sort of special discount, but that's probably not going to be compelling enough for you as a customer to follow them on Twitter unless you just obsessively love their business. Most car maintenance businesses just aren't that interesting. But if you are the owner of the business representing your business, people actually we just love to get to know interesting people no matter what they're doing, and people love to know the owner of a business because they are like a celebrity. It seems weird to you for your own business, but you know, think about when you go out to eat and the chef comes out at the restaurant and comes over and introduces himself. I mean, it doesn't have to be a celebrity chef. It can just be at your little cheap local restaurant, but you're like, wow, the chef came out and I met him. You know, it makes you feel important. People are really interested to know the people behind a business.
So that's really interesting. So you're almost saying you position yourself as the custodian of the brand, the custodian of the you know, the inspiration behind the business itself, you know?
Absolutely, because people like little behind the scenes updates, you know, for a hair salon. People like to get the little updates of who the latest stylist is, and you know, little facts about them, some cool pictures of some styles that have gone on in the salon. People love being an insider in the business.
That's interesting, and you know, I'm sort of, you know, taking one of your leads from there. I mean, for example, and I'm not sort of, you know, I'm not a serial tweeter just yet, but I am on Twitter, and mine is Matrix Mucha, because you know we do some golf tours, we do some travel services, we do some marketing, and so on and so forth. So what I use that for is just to let people what's going on in Matrixville, if you like, you know. And so you know, when there's some exciting news about, you know, a new trip to South Africa we've got or something, I'll tweet about it, or the golfer that I look after, if she's done well, and so people know what I'm going on with. So, I think that does indeed make an awful lot of sense there. Now, Laura, what's your take on the whole update side of things? Because, again, a worry that I have, and where I've always been a little skeptical in the past, is there's a fine line, isn't there, between, monitoring your tweets and just sitting down and responding to them and tweeting them out, and, getting out there and being the rainmaker for your business. Mm-hmm. So how have you personally been able to sort of, gauge how much time you put into updating your tweets and how much you get on with just doing what you're doing? And what would your advice be to others on that?
So I actually have a video at twitterwebinar.com. So Twitter, WEBINAR.com. That's my timeline for Twitter in 10 minutes a day. And it's actually a minute-by-minute breakdown of everything you need to do on Twitter to just spend 10 minutes a day, because I do think it's really important for a small business to not be on social media all day, because you have a business to run. I do too. I understand that. And, the short version is really, when you're wasting a lot of time on Twitter, if you observe yourself wasting time on Twitter, you're likely not wasting time on Twitter itself. You're likely getting sucked down the rabbit hole of links that are posted on Twitter.
Right.
The reason it takes up so much time is that people start posting interesting links. You start clicking around. You start reading blog posts. Because reading 140 characters only takes up so much time, honestly. So that's my first tip, is if you're wasting time on Twitter, observe, are you actually wasting time on Twitter? Or are you wasting time outside of Twitter on things that are linked? Because what you really want to focus on Twitter is talking to people. That's where the meat is. And most people are too concerned about what they update. Stop worrying so much about what your status updates are and just spend your time on Twitter responding to other people. That's how Twitter is really the most effective. Okay,
fantastic. So if we were to sort of go through, three top Twitter tips, must do. If you were sort of rushing over, you're just finishing your coffee at Starbucks, and someone said, Laura, what's your advice on what I can do to enhance what I'm doing? What three things would you suggest?
I'll start with a really basic one. You must have a picture on your Twitter account. That sounds silly unless you don't have a picture on your Twitter account. Your whole account is moot if you don't have a picture. People think it's spam. People think it's not real. And I would really prefer that everyone have a picture of themselves. Twitter is a one-to-one conversation medium. It feels a little odd to have a conversation with a logo. You feel like you don't know who you're talking to. You and I are talking on Skype right now, and just having that little picture that I can see of you makes it feel so much more personal, because I can imagine who I'm talking to.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's tip number one. Tip number two is link back to your site a lot. Twitter is not usually where deals are closed. Twitter is not where money changes hands. Twitter is a communication channel. Twitter's a lot like a networking event, right? If you go to a networking event, you don't expect to come home with a signed contract. You might come home with a great lead. You might come home with someone that definitely wants to work with you, but you're not going to pull out the contract. You're not going to pull out the credit card machine and do the transaction right there at the networking event. And Twitter is the same way. So you need to be using Twitter to lead people into your sales funnel. And that really means leading them to your site. Even if you don't sell things online, that can just mean, they're getting your phone number, they're getting your business's address, they're setting up their free consultation, or whatever that sales funnel is for your business. You want to make sure that you're not just keeping people on Twitter, but that you're driving people back to your business, which is your website.
Okay, so for example, then you might say, let's you've just created another program, or you've got another webinar on that. So via your Twitter, you would actually say, hey guys, got a great webinar for you to listen to. For more information, well, not necessarily click here, but it will lead them back to your blog or to your website, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. That's great. And tip number three.
Tip number three is talk to people. I just mentioned that, but it's really the most important tip on Twitter. Twitter is not effective if you just use it to send out status updates. I promise you, you will not get a ton of people following you. You will not build strong relationships. You will not get a lot of leads. You really need to be using it to have conversations with people. That's how friendships are built. That's how relationships are built. That's how trust is built. And the main form of communication on Twitter is what's called the mention or the @ reply, doing that little @ sign and then having someone's Twitter name. So I would recommend that you actually look at your own account. You can go to twitter.com/your Twitter handle and look at your tweets and see how many of my tweets mention other people's names. Because if you're looking down the page and you don't see any mentions, it's just your status updates, I promise you could be getting a lot more juice out of Twitter.
Okay, fantastic. That's terrific. And then what are the Twitter no-nos? Is there such thing as spam in Twitter?
There is such thing as spam in Twitter. The worst kind of Twitter spam is the private message spam.
Okay.
A big Twitter no-no is you do not want to pitch people things via direct message. And by that I mean doing some sort of mass generic. I mean, if you're having a conversation with someone, for whatever reason, but like if that's where the conversation goes with one person via direct message, cool. But I'm talking about using a copy and paste message that you send out to a bunch of people, basically asking them to buy something or doing a direct pitch. People view that as very obtrusive. People view that as very spammy. So don't do that.
Okay.
My second don't for Twitter is not very useful if you write like you're writing advertising copy. Twitter is really a communications tool. Maybe in the beginning that feels a little funny, but you really have to remember you just treat Twitter like the phone, like email, like talking to someone in person. So if you're writing tweets that read like headlines, that read like sales copy, it's a little bit odd on Twitter. Now that's not to say, that you can't put up promos on Twitter. You absolutely can. You can let people know, we're talking about the salon, right? We're having a special that, you can get some free highlights. But even something like that, phrasing it the way you would phrase it to a customer that's come in. If a customer comes in, you would say, hey, I just want to let you know we're having a special today. You can get 15% off your highlights. As opposed to like, mega summer blowout deal, or however you might phrase it in an ad. Phrasing it conversationally is going to be much more effective on Twitter.
Okay, fantastic. So try and avoid the sort of blanket direct messages where you're quite highly impersonal. Avoid sort of over formal copy, when you're tweeting. And would you say, is there a third no-no that you'd say to people to try and avoid a little bit?
A third no-no, well, something that's just considered a little rude, which is nice to know, which is nice to have me tell you instead of having to discover for yourself, because I don't really know how you'd figure it out. But it's considered rude on Twitter to ask someone to follow you or ask someone why they're not following you. So
Okay.
Yeah, so on Twitter, following is not mutual. You follow whoever you want. Whoever wants to follows you. It's not like on Facebook where you mutually agree to be friends with each other. And sometimes people will send a public mention saying, why aren't you following me? Would you please follow me? And it's considered a little bit rude and a little bit awkward, so I would avoid that. Okay,
interesting. Now, I mean, Laura, you always come across, in your videos and your blogs, your emails, and now as wonderfully personable. But how do you must get tons of people wanting to chat with you. So how do you know which ones to answer and which ones to not? And what's the process of you actually spending time to decide which ones to answer and which ones to not?
Well, what's so lovely about Twitter is that by nature, it's 140 characters. So I don't always respond to 100% of people on Twitter because I do get messages all day long. So if you're listening to this and I've ever missed yours, I apologize, but I do at least glance at them all and I try to respond to them all because it's really not that hard to just give a little thanks, give a little hi. It's short messages, and the nature of Twitter is that people can't ask you questions that are too complicated because you only have 140 characters. As opposed to my emails, I have my team handling my email because I can't respond to them all myself. Unfortunately, it would take all day. But on Twitter, because the responses are so short, because the messages are so short, and because you can't ask me anything too complicated, although I have had people ask me things like, tell me the process for setting up an online program over Twitter.
Really.
And I'm like, that is too complicated for Twitter. I'll just tell people.
Sure,
I cannot answer that in 140 characters. But in general, that's something that I think is really cool about Twitter. I actually am able to really keep in touch with my audience and to chat with almost everybody.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the sort of whole scenario of you're there on Twitter and you're sort of engaging with people and you've got your likes and so on and so forth. Is it a combination of sort of quality and quantity? I mean, do you manage to sort of get some new followers and unfollow some others, and how does that work? Because there's a belief out there that you need to follow an awful lot in order to get a lot of followers, and I've never really known how to answer that.
Yeah, so here's the thing. If you are after a lot of followers, it's very easy. You just follow a lot of people, and then you'll get a lot of people to follow you back. And you'll see a lot of the biggest Twitter accounts. A lot of people will, brag that they have 50,000 followers on Twitter. Well, if you look at their account, you'll see that they're following 55,000 people. So it's not any sort of great feat that they achieved. Anyone can do that. Anyone can follow a lot of people and have a lot follow back. Now, as a business, you have to ask yourself, do I really care how many people are following me? Especially as a local business, if you are a local hair salon, you, for the most part, don't really care about anyone who's following you that's not in your city. I mean, there's some exceptions, right? Maybe there's some members of the press, or maybe there's like trade shows or other sort of, marketing opportunities or partnership opportunities that you can pursue on Twitter. But in general, you want people that live in your town, that want to get their hair cut, that are interested in your salon. So my philosophy is, as a business, who cares how many people follow you if they're just random people? It really doesn't do your business any good to have 50,000 random people following you. And it can waste your time because those people do talk to you, you talk to them back, but none of them are potential customers. Now, if you're following 50,000 people in your city, maybe that's a different story. Maybe a lot of those will follow you back and a lot of them will become customers. So basically the bottom line is you have to be clear on your goals for your business and why you're doing these different things. My point of view is always quality over quantity. You want people following you that are genuinely interested in your business, that like your business enough and like you enough to want to follow you on Twitter, because those people are great prospects, great referral sources.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic, and then I'm very mindful and respectful of your time. So just to sort of round up then, I suppose, and I know it's going to be sort of an open-ended question, but I know you'll answer it as best as you can. Valuable lessons then. What have you learned? Because, I mean, I don't know, Laura, I just, it's a journey, isn't it? And I think, your ability to communicate and demonstrate to people and find these solutions is based on some pretty valuable lessons that you've no doubt learned. What lessons have you learned relative to social media over the last sort of 18 months that you'd like to share with us?
One is, let's see, what's a good overarching lesson? I mean, something that is always true is that if you just remember that you're just talking to people, you can't screw this up. And that's something that I really want to let people know. A lot of people are so afraid of social media because it does feel weird, especially Twitter. It always feels weird when you first get on, so you can expect that. People are so worried that they're doing it wrong. I personally hate to see all these articles talking about, people are screwing up Twitter and I can't believe people are doing this or that. It just makes people feel insecure. It makes people feel like this is really difficult, and it doesn't have to be difficult. I want to ease the pressure. I want to focus less on things you can do wrong and more on things you can do right. And the biggest thing you can do right is just talk to people. You're not talking to computers. You're not talking to a black hole. That's something I hear a lot. I feel like on Twitter I'm just talking into a black hole. You're talking to all the people that have chosen to follow you, and every single one of those accounts has a live human being sitting behind the computer. They're not computers. They're not Twitter accounts. They're people. So if you remember that, And you remember that with every tweet, you're just talking to other people. And you conduct yourself the way you would in person. You say hi to people. You introduce yourself. You chat with people. You respond to people. You talk about things that you think are interesting. And you follow people that interest you. You really can't go wrong on social media if your ground rule is these are human beings, and this is just a cool, fun, leveraged way to have conversations with other human beings.
You have the wonderful ability to put somebody's mind at rest, because and the reason I say this is that I can't remember which video tutorial you were doing, and it was while I was just starting out, and you were basically telling us all to just really chill out when it came to video and editing,
Yeah.
and Laura, overnight you saved me hours, because all of a sudden then, in front of a camera, if I made a mistake, I'll just say, and I'll just carry on, I'll just keep the camera running, because at first I was just thinking, no, got to stop it, got to start again. And then you were reading, and you said it was something along the lines of, hey, listen, guys, just let the camera roll, and if you want to avoid editing, then don't stop the camera, sort of thing, And it was just, and what you've just said too about social media, because there's this fear, and I think quite a bit of it is we don't know, a lot of us don't know the ins and outs of it, and then you naturally always hear the horror stories as well. You hear, what people are using Facebook or Twitter for, and straight away we put up a wall and we say, we can't do this, so it's great to have that. Now, where can people find you? And is there anything, there's always something going on in your busy world. So what are you working on right now? Where can people find you if they'd like to get some more information on how they can learn some of your tips and buy into some of your products?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at LKR, and again, that's a great place to chat with me, a great place to ask me questions. A great place to start with Twitter is the website I mentioned earlier, twitterwebinar.com, TwitterWebinar.com, because that has a free video, Twitter in 10 minutes a day.
Okay.
My main website is lauraroeder.com, LAURAROEDER. Go there and sign up for my free newsletter. I have a weekly social media marketing action item that I send out every week that people really, really find useful. And I'm coming out with a Facebook book soon, with my first book. It'll be called Facebook Fame.
Oh, fantastic. So, once you're sort of ready to launch with that, we'll monitor your progress. And if you have a bit of time, it'll be great to chat to you again about it,
Yeah.
Oh, well, Laura, this has been a real pleasure. And as I've said on more than one occasion, on a personal level, I'd just really like to thank you as well, because, I have sort of followed you for a while and your products, and it's just really great, and it's inspirational, and just really appreciate the tips and the advice that you've given us today.
Thank you so much.
So we'll speak to you